So perhaps you're training to be a therapist, or you're a recently qualified counsellor, and you've done all the theory in the classrooms and you've done your role plays with each other, but it's quite a difficult profession to actually get work experience in, or to shadow people, because obviously it's a confidential profession. And I've personally had quite a few inquiries over the years from people asking the same thing, you know, can I come and watch a session? Can I shadow a session? And obviously it's really difficult to make that an option. In fact, I don't think it is an option in most cases. So you might be wondering, so what is a real session like? You can try to have some kind of rough session plan or a structure to your session, depending on if it's a new client, you might have some client background to work from, or if it's an existing client, then you'll likely pick up from where you left off last week. But that can often be thrown completely off course depending on if the client has anything new to report on. So you need to be quite versatile in your approach. The mentality of expecting the unexpected. A couple of examples which I've experienced personally. A new female client was coming to have a one-on-one session in person, but she brought her recently born twins with her, which obviously completely threw me, but we got through the session just fine, and the babies were very happy just to sit and watch. Another example was a very nice gentleman who had been seeing for a few weeks, a few sessions. He came after work and he fell asleep in the chair. So hopefully, because I wasn't, you know, boring or anything like that, but you're not taught how to respond in these situations necessarily. So expect the unexpected, and in time your experience will serve you well. My second tip would be, don't worry if you don't have your exact approach nailed on day one. It will take some time. I'd use the analogy of learning how to drive. Just because you have a driving license, it doesn't mean that you're a great driver. So you'll do most of your learning to an extent when you're actually beginning one-on-one counselling, really. I used to have a full session planned out of what I wanted to cover with a client, and almost quite regimented questions that I wanted to ask. You know, I need to ask this, I need to ask this. Whereas now, years later, of course, if there's any essential information, partners' names, professions, health history, things like that, I can have some notes by me. But generally speaking, you can just use your perception of the moment. That's how I'd say it, the perception of the moment. And as I've mentioned in a previous video, you want the sessions to be as client-led as possible. Now, this point is really important, and you know, just because we work in mental health, it doesn't mean that we should be treated any differently in terms of receiving payment. You need to have very clear boundaries and expectations of when you're going to be paid. And if there is any agreement from client to client, perhaps you could do a discount. I know some therapists may have a handful of sessions per week which they can reduce the fees for. So if this is the case, then there needs to be that agreement spoken before any sessions have taken place. So it's up to you. There's no right or wrong whether you ask for payment before the session or after the session. Bear in mind that in some instances, if you require payment after the session, somebody may be quite visibly upset. And so it could be quite awkward to then say, before you leave, please can you give me some money whilst you're upset. Whereas beforehand, it obviously takes any misunderstanding out of the way. And also, if you have payment beforehand, this has never happened with me personally, but I'm aware that in some instances, if people don't pay beforehand, then they may be more inclined to keep speaking and speaking and speaking until they're happy, and then they will pay for the session. So you need to be in control of this situation. People are coming to you for a service, and understandably, in some instances, you may roll over the time allotment if you feel you're at a place where it would be negative to stop the session in that place. And of course, if you take payment before the session, the likelihood of you experiencing a did not attend or a no-show greatly reduces. It also helps to empower the client, and it helps keep them accountable and responsible for their session coming up. And that is actually something I've experienced as well. For the first couple of years, I was quite happy for people to pay me after a session. But when it got to a point where a few clients would message me 20 minutes before a session, I can't attend today, it becomes slightly unmanageable. If you can implement some kind of automated service, I use Calendly, which clearly I'm not affiliated with, but that works really well for me. You can take payments when the session is booked online, and then there is a very clear terms and conditions to do with cancellations. So that is something I would consider as well.